Welcome to the I almost said the wrong thing. Welcome to the Daily Fantasy Basketball Podcast. I'm Kyle McEwen. You can find me on Twitter at RotoKyleNBA. And I'm joined today, like every day, by Mark F. Roberts. You can find on Twitter at Mark F. Roberts. And that's Mark with a C, like Marc Gasol. Our theme music is Happiness is All the Rage by The Promise Ring. You can find their music on jtree.com. Mark, we should probably thank everybody who participated in the 7 listener leagues we did on Friday and Saturday. We did one together on Saturday, an auction draft over on ESPN. That was a lot of fun. We'll kind of get into talking about all that in a little bit. If you listen to us on iTunes, if you listen to us on Stitcher, if you check us out on YouTube, comment, rate, review, subscribe, please. That helps us out a ton. I can't stress that enough, how much that helps us get up in the rankings and yada, yada. I'm sure everybody loves hearing me rant about that every day. But anyways, some really sad news, I guess, to start off the podcast. Flip Saunders passed away on Sunday. He was just 60 years old, dealing with cancer. So really just it just sucks. Cancer sucks. So anyways.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's not much more to say.
No, we've all been touched by cancer in some way, through family members or friends or whatever. And it sucks. It was really shocking, I think, for me, just because to hear about Flip this morning, just because it happened so quick, like we just heard about this a few months ago, and then he steps away from the team, and then it's like, boom, you're gone. And it's just crazy. So
all the news was so positive for so long, and then it just turned so quick. So,
well, and maybe that's the kind of like, the one cool thing that you saw about the situation is just, usually, everybody's very kind when someone passes away and this and stuff. But like with Flip Saunders passing away, checking out Twitter and whatnot, all people had to say was how nice of a person and how good of a person he was, which is just great to kind of see such positivity around a single person, to know that he touched people and that it was in a way that was never negative and things like that. So that's super cool. Kind of transitioning into fantasy talk here. There's a few interesting things that happened over the weekend, or things that have developed now that the preseason has come to an end. Everything starts on Tuesday. It's 3 games on Tuesday night. You're gonna watch.
Woohoo!
Exactly. No more of this. Are they playing defense stuff for the preseason? No more of this. Well, that guy was out of the lineup, so that doesn't really mean anything kind of stuff from the preseason. Everything starts to mean something from a certain perspective on Tuesday night. So that's really exciting. We've heard about some projected starting lineups, things that are going to be happening. Willie Cauley-Stein is supposed to start at center in the front court next to DeMarcus Cousins for the Sacramento Kings. That's kind of interesting. But Mark, what does that mean fantasy-wise? Is Cauley-Stein going to get enough minutes? Is he going to have enough production to be somebody worth being a guy we add in standard leagues right now?
Yeah, so there's 2 questions there, right? Like, one is, does he get the playing time that he would need to be fantasy relevant in standard leagues? And I feel like we don't know. I mean, that's the first answer, is we're not sure. We haven't seen George Karl coach Willie Cauley-Stein before. I do feel like we've seen George Karl coach centers before where they haven't gotten even over 24 minutes per game when they've started. So I feel like he's not a must-add from that sense. I still think there's a chance he plays like 20 to 22 minutes a game, even though he's quote-unquote the starter. The other thing is, based on his translated stats from his NCAA days, I don't know that he's going to be fantasy relevant even if he got the 28 to 30 minutes a game. So he's not somebody that I'm targeting only, in standard leagues. Like maybe in a deep league, I would take a flyer on him. I think the defensive stats may be there. I think probably less blocks and more steals than you would have guessed, and not as many rebounds as you would guess. But he's not going to score. He's not going to shoot. He's not going to hit 3-pointers, and not going to pass the ball that well. So if you really needed steals from a big guy, I guess you could go after him. Otherwise, I don't think he's that interesting.
Yeah, and that's just it. I mean, even looking at what Cauley-Stein did during the preseason in just 24 minutes a game, he was averaging 6 points, about 7 rebounds, and 1.2 blocks. Like, you're not getting anything else from him.
And shooting 46% from the free throw line for those roto people.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
there's really not a lot to get excited about for Willie Cauley-Stein right now, unless he was getting upwards of 30 minutes. Essentially what you're saying, Mark, is like he's not a great per minute producer for the stats that you would expect him to be giving you some value in.
And then, so he's not very proficient in the minutes he's going to get. And then we're not sure he's going to get a ton of minutes anyway. So,
all right, you still got Kufis there.
You still got the DeMarcus Cousins Rudy Gay combo, which I think is going to get a lot of run at the 4 and 5.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's hard to say that there's definitely going to be minutes there because you've got to run DeMarcus Cousins at the 5 quite a bit actually. So
yeah.
And I mean, I know I personally didn't even think that Cauley-Stein was going to step into the starting lineup to begin the season. I thought it was going to be Kufis because Kufis was the starter for George Karl back when they were in Denver together. So Chandler Parsons, who's coming back from mini microfracture knee surgery, said that it's highly unlikely he's going to be ready for the start of the season. So what does that mean in Dallas, though? Is it John Jenkins, who had a hell of a preseason? Is it Justin Anderson? Or are they really going to go with Jeremy Evans as their starting small forward?
Kyle, you know that I've been on John Jenkins since early this summer. He's somebody that it was easy to identify who's very productive on like a per minute basis. And I think there's just going to be enough minutes on the wing for him to get some run there. I don't know whether it's going to come at shooting guard or small forward, but between he and Wes Matthews, speaking of Parsons, so between Parsons and Wes Matthews and the injuries they're dealing with, I think there'll be good time for him. Jeremy Evans is an interesting one, but Josh made a good point today. They really only have like one center on their team right now, and it's Zaza. And I'm not sure he can – well, I know he can't play 48 minutes a game. I'm not sure he can play like 35 minutes a game. So I wonder if Jeremy Evans has to become like the de facto center backup, which would take him off the wing. He's not a wing player anyway. I've seen that guy play a lot in his career. I don't think he's going to take minutes. I could see Justin Anderson being there. I could see John Jenkins being there on the wings. I think there'll be plenty of playing time for everybody who's healthy in Dallas, really. But John Jenkins, like if I'm picking somebody up because of this news, it's John Jenkins.
Okay.
It's not going to surprise anybody who's listened to me all summer.
Right. So I go back and you look at the final preseason game from this weekend for the Mavericks. Dirk Nowitzki played 26 minutes. Zaza played 27. Dwight Powell probably got the most minutes off the bench for a front court player. So Dwight Powell's probably somebody that everybody needs to put into their watch list. He went to the free throw line 12 times in the last game. A little bit interesting. Obviously, it's preseason and all that jazz.
I know JJ, our friend JJ Cali loves Dwight Powell. So, yeah, definitely keep an eye on him. He may end up getting some backup center minutes, too.
I don't believe in Jeremy Evans as being a guy who, like, legitimately is ever going to get big minutes in the NBA.
I can't believe he was – honestly, after watching him for several years in Utah, I was surprised that he got an NBA contract. So – take that for what it's worth, but he never looked like an NBA player whenever I saw him play.
Right. Even when he was trying to extend his jump shot or create a jump shot, it was always –
that weighs like 195.
It's just we don't have much faith in Jeremy Evans being legitimate. In the final Dallas Mavericks preseason game, Wes Matthews actually started at small forward in his return to action with Darren Williams at point guard and Raymond Felton at shooting guard. So the fact that Raymond Felton started at shooting guard, you can almost guarantee that there's going to be more minutes, or you would hope there'd be more minutes for John Jenkins, for Devin Harris, for JJ Barea, for Justin Anderson off the bench at those wing spots, especially with Chandler Parsons still being out. What are you doing with the reality that Wes Matthews played 16 minutes, got into some game action before the season? I'm surprised that he's already back playing in some game action.
I mean, he's like, fantasy aside, he's one of my favorite players in the NBA just because he's like, if there was one player that you would have figured could come back from an Achilles tear in 3 months less time than it should have taken, it's Wes Matthews. So from that standpoint, I'm not surprised that it's him. Like if you would have told me pick any player in the NBA that could come back early from an Achilles, I would have said Wes Matthews. But exactly, like I'm still surprised that he was able to do it. We did see him come back. We saw him start, but we only saw him play 16 minutes. until he plays, the reality of fantasy is, even though it's really awesome that he's back and he's made this comeback and he's worked tremendously hard, until he plays 30 plus minutes a game, I'm not sure it means that you want to play him on your fantasy team.
I think when you look at this Dallas Mavericks team, nobody's really expecting them to do anything this season. So it almost doesn't hurt them to have Wesley Matthews coming back and rehabbing in a game if they're limiting his minutes.
Yeah.
But it will be really interesting to see whether or not Matthews actually gets big minutes in games right up from the start of the season, because I still don't really have a lot of faith. I think there's still the possibility of him suffering a setback or having some calf issues, or who the hell knows. I'm
totally
really terrified of like a stress reaction or something, or him breaking his leg the way Kobe did because he's trying to come back too early.
Absolutely. Yeah, and Josh Lloyd asked me, he said, like, are you worried about John Jenkins now? He only played 16 minutes. And like, this is where I get back to the whole preseason thing. Look, Dallas played 15 players. Nobody played over 27 minutes a game. Ray Felton was their third leading scorer third leading minutes guy at 22.
Pick him up.
It's just not something that like you can rely on. That's not the rotation that they're going to run. But the good thing that you can take is in 16 minutes, John Jenkins put up 11 shots. He scored 13 points and grabbed 5 rebounds. Like, one of the reasons I like this guy is because he's always been a gunner. Like, the guy is going to take a lot of shots, and he shoots a fairly good percentage for the amount of shots he takes. He also, even though he hasn't shown it totally in preseason, historically has been pretty good at getting steals. So he should be able to get you enough 3-pointers. He's a better 3-point shooter than he's shown in the preseason, even, I would say. I don't think he's going to average 20 points a game. I don't think he's going to get 30 plus minutes over the season, but I do think there's a very good chance he ends up in the fantasy top 150, so that he, is somebody who should be owned this season.
It's a lot of people asked about, why is John Jenkins a top 100 player in your rankings and whatnot? And the thing is, like, it's weird because I don't even feel like I should have to defend it, because it's not, in a lot of ways, it's not our opinion. Like, John Jenkins is just good, puts up good per minute production, especially in scoring. And because of that, when we looked at the Dallas Mavericks situation and said, okay, he could average 26 minutes per game this season if he gets big minutes early in the season, then that's just where he fell in the rankings. Like, it's not even our opinion. It's just, this is what the numbers dictate if he gets this much run, and we think there's a good chanceability that he could.
There's a great chanceability. I love that word. I mean, look at the situation. Look at the guards on that team. You've got Darren Williams, historically not very durable, and probably at the end of his rope. Wes Matthews, who has been extremely durable, but is coming back from like an injury that has just ended people's career, and Chandler Parsons, who had microfracture surgery on his knee. I just think like somehow there's going to be minutes on their team. They're not a deep team. I think somehow he's going to end up getting 24 to 26 minutes a game for the majority of the season. And there could be stretches where he's in the 30s, and there can be stretches where maybe he's below 20s. But I think over the course of the season, I think there's just going to be, Chandler Parsons has to rest tonight. Wes Matthews needs to sit out for 2 or 3 games because his knee is swollen. Darren Williams' ankles are bad again. So I just, they don't have enough good players that they can afford to sit out John Jenkins with the amount of injuries they have right now.
All right, let's move over to the Pistons just briefly. I promise everybody. They announced their starting front court for their first game, or their starting forwards. It's going to be Marcus Morris at small forward and Ersan Ilyasova at power forward. Stanley Johnson's going to come off the bench, but SVG, Stan Van Gundy, came out and said Johnson has earned his minutes. He's still going to get big minutes even though he's coming off the bench. So don't worry about your late round pick of Stanley. He should be fine.
I'm excited to see how long it takes for you to have to drop Stanley Johnson in some of your leagues.
I'm excited to see how long it's going to take for you to eat crow and realize that you should have drafted Stanley Johnson in all of your leagues.
Doesn't it make you feel a little bit nervous that Stan Van Gundy, even though he said good things, has decided to not start?
No.
Stanley Johnson over Morris and Ersan Ilyasova? Like, if he was a transcendent player, wouldn't he just be starting?
No, because the other, here's the options that you have. They're using Steve Blake as the backup point guard, so Spencer Dinwiddie's not going to be getting any minutes early.
That's kind of disappointing, isn't it?
No, I almost feel like one of the reasons why they are choosing Steve Blake is because they know they're going to have Stanley in the second unit and they want the ball in Stanley's hand.
Steve Blake is one of my least favorite players in the NBA. I wish they were going with Dinwiddie. I feel like he showed flashes enough last year that he's more interesting. Like if league passes on and they have Steve Blake, I want to just change the channel. But if Dinwiddie's playing, I'm sort of interested to see how he does.
I think SVG might just trust Steve Blake to actually hit the shots when Johnson finds him, more so than Dinwiddie. So, but anyways, honestly, I think Marcus Morris is worth owning if you can get him late in drafts. I'm not targeting Ersan. The development of Marcus Morris being used as a power forward in the preseason, and then Johnson getting a lot of minutes there at small forward. At shooting guard, you've got, when Kentavious isn't playing, you're still going to have Jody Meeks playing. Mm-hmm. Reggie Bullock really showed up well in the preseason. So, and they took on his option for next season. So he's sticking with the team.
He's a guy that profiles sort of like John Jenkins. Like if he ever got into a situation where he was going to get big minutes, I think there would be a lot of people surprised how high we would have him in our rankings.
Oh yeah. Bullock has great size. He's like a shooting guard that's 6'7" or so, from Kentucky. Everybody's been intrigued with him the last few seasons, but he's never been healthy long enough to really carve out a role, whether that was on the Clippers or the Suns. So it looks like Bullock's going to be part of the rotation. And I think what you're going to see on a lot of nights is if Ersan has it going, he gets plenty of run. But if Ersan doesn't have it going, you're going to see the Pistons go to that 4 athletic guys out on the wings, and then Drummond. Just that's what it's going to be.
Right.
So, trying to think of any other starting lineup stuff. We had the Utah situation from this weekend where Howell Neto and Rodney Hood started at point guard and shooting guard, with Alec Burks and Trey Burke coming off the bench. And
it was particularly significant because Coach Quinn Snyder said he was going to treat that game like a regular season game.
And then we only saw Hayward and Rodney Hood play about 15 minutes in that game. But Hayward also had got into early foul trouble. So there's like, when Mark and I were talking about it this weekend, we're like, well, maybe it just means that if maybe they want Hood and Hayward out there on the court together. So when Hayward got into foul trouble, he was like, screw it. I'm going to get my bench guys good rotation minutes for this game anyways.
If you had to like bet your life on it, who do you think is the Jazz starting point guard on opening night? Is it Neto? I feel like it is going to be.
I do too. I mean, I take that when you have the coach come out and say tonight's lineup and tonight's rotation is going to be indicative of what we do in the regular season. Like, I'm just going to take that at face value, unless there's some other quote that you can read between the lines on or whatever, like maybe said some kind of qualifier about during the first week or during this until this guy gets back from injury. But we don't have any of that. There's no situation like that where the result is going to be different. So I'm looking at it, and I've added Howell Neto in some leagues. I don't know that he's going to get a bunch of big minutes. I mean, we changed the projections on Friday or Saturday, right? So you had to make some projections changes. What did you decide for that front court as far as like how many minutes to give each player and stuff like that?
Good question. Let's see. I put Neto at 26 minutes. I think that is sort of in line with how they played Exum last year. I think I might have put, let me see if I can find him. I might have put Trey Burke in a very similar spot and just basically said, hey, last year Trey Burke wasn't the starter either, but that didn't mean he didn't play enough minutes that, I think I'll just look it up. I'm trying to track Trey Burke. I've got also at 26 minutes. So I think Neto's the starter. I've got Burke higher in the rankings. and I've got them both about 26 minutes a game. There were some nights last year where Burke played like 30 minutes a night, even though he was coming off the bench. So I think one thing that Quinn Snyder does that is smart, that I don't know why more coaches don't do this, is he tries to, like, I can see both arguments, but rather than just saying, these are my best 5 guys, he goes with the 5 guys that make the most sense. Like, he's going to put his stars on the court, and then he's going to say, who's going to fit best with Favors, Gobert, and Hayward? And then, like, who's going to give me enough scoring on the bench that I can survive when Gordon Hayward's not on the court? So I think that they might be putting Burks and Trey Burke on the bench so that they can come in and sort of keep the team afloat while Gordon Hayward's not on the court.
Right. And then you've got 2 guys who are ball handlers, who are coming in, who Neto, if you go back and you watch what few minutes Neto had in the preseason here, I believe he started 2 games. Like, I think he started the first game of the preseason, and then he started the last game. He's hitting his 3-pointers. His 3-point shot looks good. He's from what little I've watched, he looked good on the catch and shoot.
Which is surprising because that's sort of the thing he's not supposed to be. I mean, he's supposed to be like a Ricky Rubio, a light version. A guy who's creative and can pass and is fairly good on defense, but is not much of a shooter.
And I'm just confused about Neto a little bit because, like, the most assists he had in a game was 3. Now, granted, the most minutes he played in a game during the preseason was 23. So there's, it's hard to discern what his ceiling is and all that kind of stuff. But when you watch his highlights from the preseason, you're like, oh, this guy's got an awesome feel for where people are on the court. He finds his teammates. So you just you get the sense that his assist numbers should be much, much better than what they were in the preseason. We don't know how many of those passes that he was making in the preseason ended up being just missed shots and stuff like that too. So
interesting guy. Hood was one of he moved up pretty high in our rankings. I put him at 30 minutes a game. I figured if he was starting, that put him into the top, ranked him 125th in our rankings. I moved Burks down a little bit. I think Alec Burks, I moved down to 29 minutes a game. So they're right by each other. I guess I see both of those guys like as toss-ups. I'm not sure what to do with either of them. They're right by each other in our rankings. So I guess pick whichever one you believe in, or if you can afford to, put both of them on your roster. I think we'll know in a week a lot better who's going to have value for the rest of the season.
I didn't trust Trey Burke. I just feel like he's like at best the 5th or 6th option on that team.
Well, in some respects, he's the first option, but I think that's part of the reason he doesn't play as much as he should. Right,
and that's like I don't trust Trey Burke to shoot a good enough percentage, get enough minutes, be consistent enough, all those things. So I'm hedging my bets with a Rodney Hood or Alec Burks to see if they develop into something more this season for fantasy. Both players have a great level of talent. And then Neto
that lineup is with those two without Trey Burks or Raul Neto.
Like, I do too. Like that's your most size.
Yeah, if they finish off that way, because Gordon Hayward's going to play point guard almost regardless. You have Burks and Hood on the court together. Yeah, you're right. A lot of size there, a lot of talent there.
I mean, I think you kind of, but by saying the whole Gordon Hayward's the point guard anyways thing, it's like you kind of get it. If you're Quinn Snyder, and you touched on this earlier, but you need instant offense off the bench, and Hood and Raul Neto just aren't those guys. So you might as well put them into the starting lineup, because that way you can kind of filter everything through Gordon Hayward, through Derek Favors. Hood's there to shoot. Neto's there to shoot if needed. Just keeps the ball in the hands of the guys that you want it in. And then if Hayward, Favors are out, you got Burke or Burks to really kind of put the pressure on and all that kind of jazz. So, yeah, hopefully it works out. There's a lot of ticky-tack injuries. I'm not worried about most of them right now. But going into the first week of the regular season here, starting with Tuesday's games, we got 4 guys who are going to miss one game to start the season. Dwight Howard's missing the first game of the season. Giannis Antetokounmpo is missing the first game of the season. Kelly Olynyk is missing the first game of the season, and Trevor Booker is missing the first game of the season. Dwight Howard picked up 4 flagrant fouls throughout the playoffs, so he ended up getting 1-game suspension. Giannis shoved Mike Dunleavy in the Chicago series in the first round during the playoffs. Kelly Olynyk ripped off Kevin Love's arm, which caused Love to, of course, undergo shoulder surgery this season or this offseason. And then Trevor Booker pimp slapped Roy Hibbert during a preseason game. So those 4 guys are all going to miss 1 game this week. And if we look at the schedule for the week, you got 4 games for Chicago, 4 games for Atlanta, 3 games for everybody else, and then 2 games for Minnesota, 2 games for Philadelphia. So we're not really playing. If you're playing in weekly leagues, you're not really playing your Minnesota guys. You're not probably playing your Philadelphia guys. And then you're just going to kind of roll out everybody else pretty much.
Kyle, that is a fancy looking thing you got up on the screen. You want to tell us about that?
Yeah, so I guess I probably should have announced this at the start of the podcast. I just got hired by basketballmonster.com. So I'm going to start working for them in the next week or so, and I'll be working with them all season. This will be in addition to doing the daily fantasy basketball podcast with Mark. So Mark and I will still be doing the podcast most nights. And then I'll be working, during the day or whatever for Basketball Monster. So big thanks to Josh Lloyd and to Ken Slight over there. Ken owns the site. He builds all the tools and stuff. I wish people knew Ken's name, because I've been, and this isn't BS. This isn't like, oh, I'm going to talk nice about my new employer or whatever. When I worked for RotoWire still, I would constantly talk about how good the tools were at Basketball Monster. I would constantly say, like, man, I wish we had these on our site. I wish we had these on our site. But now that, it's kind of cool to be like, we do have this on our site now that I'm working for Basketball Monster, and now that I get to continue working with Josh and all that kind of stuff. It's really a perfect storm, perfect situation. And I'm just super happy to work with Ken and work with Josh over there. So, anyways, that's what this thing is. It's the schedule analyzer over at Basketball Monster. And it's super cool. Basketball Monster is a great site. It's a subscription-based site. They have awesome, super in-depth tools that Ken built out. We have friends, though, who have other sites, too, who are super awesome, has helped us out a lot. Joey from over at #basketball, he's got a free scheduled grid that you can, it's not the same as the weekly schedule analyzer that's at Basketball Monster, but really cool tool that lets you see who's playing on what night has lower games, all this kind of stuff to help you plan out your week. So some really cool stuff over there at #basketball too, if you wanted to get a look at some free tools, if you can't afford a subscription to Basketball Monster or whatever. So is that fair? Was that a fair description of the
great. Back to your suspensions. Who if you could be the president of the basketball, how the president has veto power, if there's one suspension that you could take off, who would you want to take off and why? Is there one person that you feel like either they're what they did was so cool that they shouldn't be punished for it, or they shouldn't have been punished in the first place because it wasn't that egregious?
I don't care if Dwight Howard gets suspended because he's a douche.
Okay.
Giannis. Howard's just so flippant about
yeah. No, you're right.
He doesn't he doesn't think seriously.
Yeah.
And that's cool. What was that?
No, you're right. I'm agreeing with you. So what about Giannis? Would you take his? I don't think you take Olynyk's. So
I think Olynyk was being a jerk.
Yeah.
He was. That was too aggressive. What he did.
I don't think he was trying to injure anybody, but
I'm not sure.
Yeah. So basically, would you rescind Giannis's or Booker's?
Booker's.
Yeah.
Because Hibbert. Here's the thing. On that play, Julius Randle flopped, and then Hibbert got all, he peed it. He got all his panties in a bunch. And he runs over there and he gets in Booker's face, and Booker looks up and sees this big Frankenstein looking dude all up in his face looking down at him. And he's just like, you big, ugly idiot. Your teammate just flopped. So I'm going to slap you because you're a friggin' idiot. And I think that should be allowed.
Hey, when you're president of the basketball suspensions, you can go ahead and take care of that.
I can fire off my email to Roy Hibbert and be like, Trevor Booker was justified in slapping you because you a punk it. So yeah, that would be my Adam Silver email. So yeah, that's pretty much all I've got there. Do we want to talk a little bit more about any of the projections? Are there any guys that kind of stood out or that were brought up in the projections with our final update before the weekend?
There was only one guy that really had a big jump into the top 100, and I guess I'll mention him. There was a lot of people moved up and down. Like Neto moved up, Steven Adams moved up a little bit with the new word that he's going to probably start. Gary Harris moved up, Kent Bazemore moved up. None of them to the point that you would necessarily like really have to draft them. But Kyle, our illegitimate son Kristaps Porzingis moved into the top 100, which delighted me to no end. He's likely going to be the starter in New York, and I love adding that guy at the end of every draft that I've done, except for our listener league where people were, just too smart.
I think didn't I get him in the listener league?
You probably did, but you had to pay like not the end round value for him.
I paid $7 for him. I was okay with that.
I was out of money at that point. I was very sad to see him go. But yeah, you can usually get him for $1 is all I'm saying. And I think there's a good chance he'll be a top. And like I've always said, if not, you'll know right away. So you can drop him and move on to someone else. Let me just check this and see if there's anybody that moved way down that we need to talk about. Burks moved down a little bit. The major, and that should surprise no one with his injury. He moved down. Zach LaVine moved down pretty far. I'm not sure why Will Barton moved down so far.
And Zach LaVine moved down because he lost his starting job last week.
Exactly.
So,
yeah. We talked about all the rest of these guys that are relevant here.
Yep, absolutely. Do there was in a lot of places people were pretty high on Kyle O'Quinn this season. Are you as high on him, or can you maybe explain why people were so high on him? Potentially,
he's very good on a per minute basis. We've seen him. He's going to rebound and block shots for you. So there's a lot of the guys in this league that they feel like if they ever got minutes, would be able to give you. Like I would have said before last season, Rudy Gobert was the prime example of this, of a guy who in limited minutes gets a lot of blocks and a lot of rebounds. O'Quinn actually can pass fairly well and seemingly can shoot. So he can do a lot of interesting things, but they've just never got the minutes in their career to be interesting. And now Kyle Quinn's on a bad team, right? Like the Knicks don't have a ton of talent. So maybe there's an opportunity for him there. I guess we can't love both Porzingis and Kyle O'Quinn as far as giving them enough minutes to be fantasy relevant. And so we've only got Kyle O'Quinn for 20 minutes a game. We've got Porzingis for like 28 minutes a game. So that's why he's less high in our rankings. If we knew that Kyle O'Quinn was going to get 30 minutes a game, I would definitely recommend drafting him though. He definitely is a capable player.
Straight up. It's possible if Robin Lopez gets injured or something, maybe Kyle O'Quinn gets more minutes at center.
Or if Porzingis sucks, like don't misunderstand what we're saying. We're not saying like Porzingis is a lock to be a great player. He may be a flop. Like all we're saying is there's a lot of upside there. There's a lot of potential, and he should have a good opportunity to play. So take a risk on him. And if he doesn't work out, then you can move on. Pick up O'Quinn.
Porzingis sucks. I think it's going to be like an Andrea Bargnani situation where he gets tons of opportunity because they're desperate for him to develop the right way. But here's the other side of that. He's not Bargnani. No. Like this dude hates everybody. He's a big competitor. Bargnani's just out there knitting patchouli sweaters and whatnot. So he's just a lazy, ugly primo pasta eating punk.
I'm not going to be able to top that. So, but I agree with everything you said. There's just Nothing I can say that would add anything to what you've just said about Andre Bargnani.
You could just say that he sucks, but you're not mean like that. All right, let's take a look at the auction league that we did this weekend together really quick. Mark, looking at your team, are there, James Harden was the guy that you spent the most money on, $69. Paul George behind that at 45. Then you paired him with Kyrie Irving at 30. Jeff Teague at 29. This was a head-to-head auction draft. 12 teams. I was using our punt strategy, all the 6 positive counting categories. Which punting strategy did you use for this league?
I solicited some help from some people, and the one that I narrowed down on was try punting, blocks, and field goal percentage. I never tried that before, so I gave it a shot. So what you want to do in that sort of a strategy is make sure you get a lot of guys with points and assists early, particularly points, I think. And I ended up punting rebounds about halfway through. You can see I barely have one center on my team. So from that standpoint, I feel great about getting Kobe Bryant for $8 as somebody who could give me a lot of cheap points if I'm not worried about field goal percentage. I steered clear of all the guys that don't shoot well from the line. So it'll be interesting. I've never really tried this out. I have to say the guys that were in that draft, I don't know if all of your listener league drafts were like this. I only did the one. You really went all out and did all 7, which I commend you for. But the guys in this draft, man, they didn't let us get away with anything. Every player we got, I feel like I didn't get as good a value on him as I wanted to. And there was a lot of players that I normally draft that I wasn't able to.
I mean,
I'm
it
fairly
definitely
happy with my team still. It was an interesting way to go. Sorry, go ahead.
This auction was, and I'm not blowing air. Maybe it was because we were both in it or whatever, but this was the toughest auction that I did out of the 3 that I did yesterday. And yeah, it was just brutal because everybody was clued into who people like. When Reggie Jackson went up, it was, Kyle's going to bid, he's going to get a third mortgage on his apartment and pay for Reggie Jackson in this auction league. And I had to get Reggie Jackson, which is, I'm sure a lot of people think that's just clinically insane. But if he's a second round value to me, then I'm okay with it. I also had to pay $25 to get Mirotic. I had to pay $23 to get Karl Anthony Towns. Yeah, it was brutal, man.
If everybody on your team hits, though, you're going to be in pretty good shape. You've got a lot of guys that have a high ceiling, that's for sure.
But I think that's generally one of the things that I always draft for is just I'm not drafting for guys to I'm always drafting for a higher ceiling. So if I have to choose between 2 guys later in a draft and I'm sitting there and I'm saying, okay, do I take Alec Burks, who I thought was going to be the starting shooting guard, or do I take Stanley Johnson? Who's going to put up the better across the board production? And
I mentioned you paid $12 for Stanley Johnson.
I just, when I looked around and I said, who else is available? Are they good? And that's something that when you have, I always hold on to my money in auction drafts. I'm never spending big on guys early unless for whatever reason. And, everybody says this, all auctions are different and all that kind of stuff. That's so true. Yeah. Yes, in a lot of respects, people will just follow along with whatever the projected auction values are. But you get into a lot of drafts, and if people just start bidding up those first couple players, then you see tons of money go off the board really quick. But if everybody's bidding right around the projected auction dollars, then it starts to get a little dangerous because if everybody's holding on to their money and there's tons of money left, then you really, really need to pay attention to those few instances where you can save a couple bucks and get a player, early. One of the guys in our auction draft on ESPN on Saturday, Mark, he did such a good job as far as throwing out some guys early. He threw out Myers Leonard early, and I was sleeping on it. And Myers Leonard got picked for $7.
Yeah.
$7, man. Like that's cool at the end of the draft. If it's the end of the auction, everybody's got like $5 maximum bids. So Myers Leonard goes for $5. But early in the auction,
what do you think Myers Leonard should go for? That's about right for me.
When I look at what he can be this year and how good his percentages are, regardless of the fact that it's a head-to-head and I'm punting those, I mean, I look at Myers Leonard and he looks like he's going to put up the same stats as Mirotic.
Yeah. I think 7 is fine for him. The part I had a bigger issue was that we let Lopez go for 10 a few picks later.
Yeah, this same guy got Brook Lopez for $10 like 20 minutes later. Yeah. And it's because I was watching Kimmy Schmidt on Netflix while doing the auction and chuckling away, laughing my butt off and not paying attention to the auction enough. So those were probably like the two best buys of the draft. But that's another reason why I bought Stanley Johnson for $12 because the same guy was going after Stanley Johnson and I was pissed off at him and I was like, no.
It got personal.
Yeah, it did. Because like if you get two great buys, and the thing is, he was really patient with his money. He got Mike Conley at $19, Ty Lawson at $19. I realize some people think that's probably high for Lawson, but I think it's a perfectly fine based on his upside.
$5 is pretty good value there.
So it's just, the guy, he did a great job, and it really pissed me off. Anthony Davis went for 79. Kawhi Leonard went for 42. This is probably my last question about the auction, but like, Mark, how do you justify that at the beginning of a draft, you'll get guys going for like $80 a pop or, $70 a pop. But then you got a guy like Paul George or John Wall going for like $45 or thereabouts. Like how, like, is this guy really, is Anthony Davis really twice as good as John Wall? Like, it just feels weird to me that the prices fall the way they do.
Certainly it depends on the punt strategy that you're going with, right? And the league setup. And that's one thing that we preach all the time. Like, it's all league dependent. But in general, no. I think Anthony Davis is one of the worst values right now. I love the player. Like, don't get me wrong. If Anthony Davis is on the TV, I'm not changing the channel. I'm not leaving to get a drink. Like, I want to watch the dude play. But, he's not worth $80 most of the time, particularly if you're punting. Like, that's one thing about Anthony Davis is he's so good at everything. If you start punting, you're taking off his value. You're letting him become less value, more valuable. Like, a lot of times punting will take away that one or two categories that somebody's bad at. He doesn't have those. So he's best in like a roto format. Whereas like DeAndre Jordan, if you're punting free throw percentage, he jumps way up the rankings. Anthony Davis kind of does the opposite. So I haven't picked him anywhere this year, unfortunately. I love to have him. He's fantastic. He's probably the best player in a lot of cases, but he's not worth 40% of your team's budget. When I can get, like you said, I can get James Harden for $10 or $12 less. And I actually think in most punt scenarios, he's a better player. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I get that, but
like, how are you going to spend 40% of your budget on a player that hasn't exceeded?
But the thing is, like, for me, with these auction leagues, I hate spending $70 on a player, let alone 80. Like, I hate spending $45 on Paul George. I spent $46 on Paul George in one of my auction leagues, and I wasn't happy about it. So, I mean, is there a big difference between $80 versus $70 on a $200 budget? Mark might be dropping out there a little bit, but so that's pretty much it. I would say my favorite team name was Little Red Rodney Hood. That was my favorite team name from the draft. So I don't know if you had a favorite team name from the draft at all, Mark. There's a pretty pretty simplistic it looks for the most part for us. But did you hear my question about the difference between $70 versus $80 in a $200 budget? Like, is there that much difference, that $10 between James Harden and Anthony Davis? Sounds like Mark is kind of out. So we're going to just end it here. Thank you so much for listening today. This is the Daily Fantasy. Oh, now you're there. Hey, Mark.
Just end it, man. This is getting ridiculous.
You want to try right now?
No, I was going to say there is a difference between, $15 is worth a lot, especially at the end of the draft. So if I think Harden is better than Davis, and I can use that $15 to buy a bunch of players I want at the end of the draft, I can use that to buy Porzingis and Mirotic in most leagues. Yeah, I think that's great.
Okay, I'm going to try and get this last question in. What is like do you, when you're going through the draft, sometimes like the reason why I drafted Paul George in one of my leagues for $46 is because I'm looking at him still being available and the auction dollar is going up on him and he's about to get sold for the mid 40s. And I'm just like, well, if Anthony Davis is an $80, somebody paid $80 for him, why wouldn't I pay $46 for Paul George if he's still like a projected top 6 player? But I don't like comparing the price of a player against the price of another player in an auction because I feel like if you start doing that, you can get yourself into a trap where you're justifying paying a certain amount for a player based on what another player was bought for, when realistically, all I want to focus on during an auction draft is what do I legitimately think is a fair price to pay for these players? And in most cases, I don't want to spend more than $30 for like a single player a lot of the time.
I didn't hear most of that question.
That's great. Anyways, just some random thoughts. Once again, I am Kyle McEwen. You can find me on Twitter at RotoKyleNBA. And this is...
Hey, this is Mark Roberts. You can find me on Twitter at Mark F. Roberts. Mark is with a C.
Like Marcus
guys. Yep.
Or Marco Rubio. You can please rate and review us on iTunes, Stitcher, all those places. That would be a great help. If you'd like to donate to the site, you can do that on dailyfantasybasketballpodcast.com. Once again, thank you to Basketball Monster for hiring me, Ken, Josh, looking forward to that. And yeah, just have a good rest of the couple days, you guys. We'll be back likely tomorrow with another podcast heading into the season. So awesome. No more preseason, only fun stuff. Have a good one, guys. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you later. We love you. Bye-bye.